Hello everyone, Anita here, and today we have quite a special picture to work on. Some time ago, quite a few months ago actually, my boyfriend opened an online store with some of his friends. And so for this Christmas season, I have offered to create like a little postcard design that you could add to orders as a little, gift. Freebie thingy, just to wish them, the customers Merry Christmas. I'm personally a big fan of spoiling my customers. If you've ever ordered from me, I like adding extras to every order, and that's something, I like to receive gifts and when I order stuff as well. It doesn't have to be anything big, but so naturally I do the same thing for my customers because that's how I approach things. If I enjoy something, I'm trying to do the same thing for others. Not with everything, but in this case it really works. And so I've created this tiny little illustration, and it's my signature hamster character carrying all kinds of shopping bags with the logo from the store. If you're interested in the store, there is a link in the description. It is, however, only a Dutch store. It's called Merge Capital. They're only shipping to, at the point of recording this video, they're only shipping in Holland because the store has just been opened. Unfortunately, not everyone will be able to get one of these, but if you're interested, there's a link in the description. Any kind of visit is always appreciated. And so, as you can see here, I'm just doing my typical first layers. So, because this picture is going to be a bit smaller, I'm painting on an A5 piece of paper on my regular Arches hot pressed watercolor paper. However, this picture will be printed and reproduced on an A6 piece of paper, so it will be half the size. However, I also wanted to have this picture as a gift to my boyfriend so he can just have it. And so I want this picture to have no background. However, I really don't like to have just sharp lines anymore. I used to like that in the past. Nowadays, I'm more fond of just the colors bleeding into the background, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm starting with a very, very delicate layer of color, very watered down layer that I'm just kind of letting it mix on the paper. So I'm just letting it feather out into the paper. For example, around the red hat, you will have a little bit of a pinkish red hue from that very first layer. And it's not a lot of color, it just kind of helps everything nicely blend together. And then after that layer is done, I'm coming back and adding the color again on top, just to deepen it and just build up the intensity. And I do that with every single layer. I just add a lot of very thin layers of color. I used to think in the very beginning when I started painting, and even in the beginning of this year when I'm talking about my painting process, I had this feeling by watching other artists that I had to be very brave with my watercolors, and a lot of artists that I see, they just use 1 or 2 layers of watercolor and they can create that amazing intensity with just 1 layer. However, when I do that, I'm not exactly fond of the result. I don't really like it. It's very rough around the edges, and while that is fine, if you like it, I like my watercolors to be very soft. And I realized that I liked it much better when I was applying a lot of very thin layers of color, even if it's the same color. It doesn't have to be different about it. It helps. Sometimes that layering effect, especially when you're doing shadows or shading, shading, it really helps if you're just using a lot of very thin layers. And I realized, you know what, I don't have to do what others do. I can just do it my way as long as I like it. Especially that you guys know I'm self-taught, and I research things only when I approach a certain problem that I have. That's when I really get into the problem. And so I did some research, and there is a lot of artists who do it the same way I do. So they use a lot of thin layers, build up the color. So I figured, it's fine. It's fine. So I'm just filling in the areas for now. I wasn't exactly sure what to do with the bags. As per usual, I had an idea that, of course, the hamster is supposed to be orange, the hat red because it's a Santa hat. I also pulled those colors into different parts of the picture. So because there's a lot of at least some merchandise, just in those bags and in the little cart. So we have a little Tsum Tsum, Winnie the Pooh. So he's the same orangey yellow color that the hamster is, and that the Merch Capital logo is. Similarly, the little cart behind hamster is the same red that the hat is. So I'm just repeating those colors. But then after I've added them, I had a little bit of a problem what to do with those bags because I really liked them the way they were. They were just plain with the logo on top, and so I couldn't really add any pattern under that logo, at least not as much. Eventually you will see me adding it, but at that point I thought, I can't really add a logo, a pattern under the logo. And I didn't really know what to do with those because the color scheme was so perfect to me. I really loved it. And I didn't want to incorporate any new color. I wanted to keep it the same way it was. And so the way I've fixed that problem or resolved it, there is a little pen in one of the bags. It's a cactus pen. And the cactus pen is this really nice green teal color. And I've decided that this color was, it was there, but it was not. It was just in this one spot. I could repeat it somewhere else, and it was a perfect opportunity to pull it into somewhere else. In this case, I pulled that color and used it on the bags. And that's what you see me doing. The bags in the back are the same green color as the cactus. And at this point, I thought to myself that this picture was very flat. Now, bear in mind, I have not added the lines yet at this point, and you won't see me adding a lot of them because they were so finicky and so tiny that it was really hard for me to record that. It was also very boring to watch. Adding lines is not very interesting in my opinion. Especially that all I'm doing is adding the same color, just a little bit more concentrated onto the pre-existing lines. I'm just deepening them. Here I'm adding shading, a little bit of shading. I don't really like using it that much, so there's just a little bit. And I'm using the same blue color that I used to mix the green. And I'm just using it on pretty much everything. I'm just layering it on every single shape, at least where I felt it was needed. And trying to build up some kind of depth, especially on those white bags, because there is a white background and I have those white bags. I didn't want to add any color on them at this point. You can see me I'm actually recording this piece during a live stream. So this was my very first time recording during a live stream, and I was very happy. Eventually I got the hang of it, but you can see me gesturing a little, and some parts are a little bit cut off because of that, but bear with me, I'm just learning here. So I keep adding the colors, and at this point I kept thinking the whole time what I'm going to do with the bags in the front. And I'm pushing that away, so I'm adding everything else first. I'm adding all the details that I'm sure that are supposed to be in the picture, like the shading, just later on the lines. I think I add them before. So I'm just, and here you can see me adding the pattern, because I really felt there was just, everything was too flat. There was not enough interest. I needed a pattern. And so I'm using the same grayish color that I used on the pusheen that you can see near the Tsum Tsum, and the same brown that I've used in the logo. And one of the Merch Capital's flyers has a little polka dot design on it. I've decided it was perfect to use that same polka dot on the bags. I thought it was really, really cute. That's what I've done, and at that point I figured, oh, it's perfect. There is this little point of interest, a little extra detail that I was looking for. And so I've decided that it was the perfect time to add lines. Because I'm adding my lines with watercolor, I try to do that at the very, very end when every single bit is colored in. That's because when you add watercolor layers on top of your existing lines, and I like my lines to be sharp. Of course, the nature of watercolor is that it gets a little bit reactivated, it will bleed a little bit, and so the lines are not going to be as sharp if you layer watercolor on top of them again. I did that in the past, and it's just pretty much a waste of time because you keep adding those layers over and over again just to trying to get the sharpness back a little bit. So as you can see, that's what I said. I'm not going to show all the lines because really there is nothing to them. I'm just repeating the same line that's underneath, but with the color, a bit more concentrated version of the color that the background is. So for example, orange hamster will have dark orange lines. So not really rocket science there. And so here I'm using colored pencils to bring in a little bit more, I wouldn't say texture, however, that's what it really is. I really like the feel of colored pencil on top of watercolor. It has that, it's not, it is texture, but it's not exactly for the purpose of texture. It adds a little bit of softness to the watercolor. The watercolor by itself is really flat, but when you add the colored pencil on top of it, it just adds a little bit of soft. It really looks soft, much softer than the watercolor on its own. And I really like that. I really like that effect. And so that's why you can see me adding the colored pencil everywhere, because that's another rule I have. If I add colored pencil to one detail, so for example to the fur, I'll add it everywhere else as well, at least a little bit. That makes the whole picture look coherent, and it just looks the same. It just looks like everything belongs together. In the past, I would use colored pencils only in one place, and then everything would just look a little bit weird when there was just, for example, the fur on the hamster has been covered with colored pencil and the rest not. Of course, if you're into it, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't use it like that. It's just purely personal preference. And so you can see me adding the white details now. There's quite a lot of white details here, especially that I want to add it on the fur, the hat trim made of fur. I made it, even though the fur trim on the hat and the little pompon is supposed to be white, I purposefully, excuse me, it's been a while since I did a voiceover. I purposefully added a darker shade on the whole area, just because it needed a little bit of contrast for the white paint to show. I needed that contrast because, especially if you're thinking digitally wise, in person you'll always see a little bit of white shimmer around, and if you angle the piece, you will see a little bit of a rise where the gouache is layered. However, in digital painting, you don't really see it, so I need that contrast, and that's why the basic fur is brown. And so I'm adding the white lines and just building them up because I'm working with a very watered down gouache and trying to build it up. This way it's a little bit more, it looks more like watercolor rather than acrylic paint is what I've discovered. If I just dunk a whole lot of thick gouache, it will just look very 3D instead of flat like watercolor should. And so I'm adding it everywhere, and that's pretty much the last step of it. It's just me deciding which parts need a little bit of a highlight because that's what white gouache really is. It's just a little bit of a highlight here and there. And for me, it's that part, that moment when I'm adding white gouache. It's what really brings life to the painting, especially the moment when I'm adding white gouache into the eye, the little glimmer of light in the eye. That's when the little character comes to life. And that's it for today, guys. That's the little illustration. I'm extremely happy with it. It's a tiny little thing, but also my boyfriend and his friends were really happy with it. So thank you so very, very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye! I wanted to have the edges really, really black, and the middle mostly, not fully, but mostly just to have the color in the middle.